Hey guys, you can hear me. I'm hoping at this point now because we had some bad technical issues. We had YouTube crashing and audio crashing, and then the ceiling crashing. Oh, okay, that didn't happen.
The ceiling's still there.
It is still there, but I feel like it was going to with everything else. It just went. It was like, man, technology and me today just are not working.
But that's okay. We all have our good days, and we have our not so good days, right?
Yes, and
That's what we're talking
you know
about.
what's even more amazing?
Yeah.
Is our producer is just giving me major thumbs up that we're actually doing everything's going great. So I'm very happy
It's
now.
awesome. Should you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, by the way, I'm Joel,
I'm Tony.
and so let's actually kind of switch it over to what we're supposed to be talking about today. And I'm
Yeah, but who are we? Backwoods Brothers.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what we are. Good. Can you remember his? Yes. Cough. Yeah, there we go. But what are we talking about today, Joel? But before that, the disclaimer. We need that, don't we?
yeah, I'm about to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're actually talking about a much more serious topic, and that topic is suicide. That can be a very triggering subject for some people, and so we wanted to kind of get you guys a warning ahead of time to let you know that there might be some videos or some conversation that potentially could be triggering to you. So right at the bottom of our screen, we actually have a national suicide prevention hotline. So if you feel like you're upset, you need to talk to somebody, you're having an issue, you have a friend that's watching maybe having an issue, please call the number or have them call the number and talk to somebody right away, okay? It will be on there the entire show. So let's jump into it.
Well, you know what? I want to talk about the seen and unseen before we get started. So the seen and unseen, there's the surface that you see and there's the unseen. And as you guys know, I have a seen, and that is my visual impairment. I'm blind in my left eye. I didn't get a chance to tell you that because you knew a lot about Joel, but I didn't tell you that. I'm blind in my left eye and partially sighted in my right eye. And I think I even knew enough that I knew that the light went off during that time. So I could actually see that light going off, which is awesome. And so that's the outside that I can see, that you can see. You can see a visual impairment. What we're going to be talking about are things that are going on the inside. A lot of people understand the outside. Joel, when you look at me, you know I'm visually impaired. But you don't know the things, right? He says you are.
No.
But when you look at the inside, you don't know the things that are going on inside of me. And that's the unseen of what we're talking about tonight. And so tonight we want to invite you into that conversation. As a matter of fact, we invite you to also do some true and false questions with us on the subject of suicide. This is never an easy topic to talk about, but with our pandemic and things that are going on in real life, people feel helpless. They feel hopeless. As a matter of fact, I've heard this COVID-19 thing that has happened to us for a year now is so outside the norm that we are considered going through what we call mass trauma.
Definitely.
And with mass trauma, we also have this thing called grief. So if you see that people are on edge, you go to the grocery store and people are mean mugging you, it's probably because they're going through that same mass trauma and they're wearing it on the outside without the identification on the inside. Mm-hmm. So again, we're talking about the inside tonight. So we're going to ask you to examine those insides, those things that are unseen. So I'm going to ask you some questions, Joel.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that you're ready for them. So like, why don't you just shake it up a little bit? Oh. You heard that bone crack? He's getting old. Oh. You know what? That reminded me of the. Never mind. I can't go there. Here we go. Here it is. True or false questions. We're gonna get back to this. True or false? If your friend is talking about suicide, it is best to wait a few weeks before talking about it to see if he or she starts to feel better.
I'm going to say false. You're going to want to talk to someone right away because, you know, 2 weeks is a long time when someone's feeling suicidal. I'd say kind of immediate action is kind of more the thing I would take.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is not best to wait. True or false? Once a person is suicidal, he or she is suicidal, and catch this, forever.
I'm going to have to say that's definitely false because I don't believe anyone's anything forever. Just because you might be having depression or something that's causing suicidal tendencies now doesn't mean that, 6 months or a year from now or even 10 years from now, it means you're still going to have suicidal tendencies.
Absolutely. But in the midst of depression, it might feel like it's forever. But in actuality, that's a different
Yeah,
story.
Exactly.
Yeah, really good, really good. And the last one, Joel? True or false? Most suicides occur without warning signs. What do you guys think?
I'm gonna don't answer the question. I want the audience to give us some answers before you give me the answer to
Okay,
this one.
Smarties.
I'm gonna answer what I think here,
Uh-huh.
but don't tell me if I'm right or wrong. So,
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and say false.
Now, why did you not tell me the answer? Because you wanted your audience to do something?
I would like my audience to actually, or not our audience.
Yeah, ours.
I'm special.
You are.
So I would love for the audience to actually take a minute, give us what they think their answer is going to be, right there in the comments, and we actually have a gift for one random selected audience member that does participate in the comments, and that's going to be a book that was we presented during a live stream the other day, and it's actually signed by the author. It's a kid's book, something to give to your kids, or to a friend. And it talks about, it's around Christmas, but it talks about being thankful and the things you got in God. And
Appreciative?
thankful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, Joel, let me read this question again for our studio audience. Here we go. True or false? Most suicides occur without warning signs. And as you're putting down your answer of true and false, and we want you to definitely participate with us, I'm going to actually introduce the person who's going to be coming on, because I forgot to do that.
Oh, well, that's what we do right before we cut to the next scene.
Yes, so we're right on that.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to present our next guest after our break. Her name is Annie Zen. She is a well-known in our school district counselor, and we're so excited to have her. She's a wealth of information, so you're going to want to take note. You're going to want to really engage, so we invite you to do that today.
Definitely. We will be taking questions actually starting during the next session, when we come into the next segments. Please send your questions in, and they'll hand them to us, and we'll try to get them answered as we go throughout the show. But if you feel like you want to wait to our special section just for question and answers, we will have one where we will be talking just about the questions you sent us.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think this topic was brought up from one of you, and so keep on giving us some ideas.
Exactly.
Because we definitely want to talk about things that are on your mind.
Exactly. So we're going to go to break here. This is a pretty powerful video. So again, we will have that number even through the video at the bottom of the screen. So if you're feeling triggered at all, please call the number. But definitely also, if you have a friend that you are concerned that might be suicidal, please either call for them or get them the number to have them call. Okay? Thanks, guys.
Please don't kill yourself. I'm talking to you, and I don't pretend to know everything that you've been through. But if it's shame you feel, just know that I've sinned too. And if it's pain you're feeling, just know that that's something I went through. I don't know your story, but I know you and me are a lot alike. So let me talk to you for a minute while I got this mic. I was 18 when I pulled a gun out. At the time it felt like my options had run out. So I put that barrel to my chest and I pulled the trigger halfway. I tried to muster up the courage to put myself away that day. But halfway under that trigger pull I stopped. Tears flooded my eyes and that pistol dropped. And I sat in my room and I sobbed for an hour. On the outside I was fine, on the inside a coward. The noise of my depression had gotten louder and louder. I had planned a way out in a baptism shower of gunpowder. I'd been lied to just like you're being lied to now. Other people can't help you, but I might know how. Because I've walked in your shoes and I've been at my lowest. And if you don't know anything, know this. You might tell me you're gonna kill yourself and you're close to this, but God wants to meet you in the middle of your hopelessness. God wants to give you a way out of these feelings of doubt. And the sounds of chaos might be reverberating around you like heavy metal. But confusion isn't from God, it's straight from the devil. And he wants to silence the noise and bring peace to you. And I promise if you just ask him, he'll see you through. You got to this place because you tried fighting your own fight. And where did that get you except contemplating about taking your own life? And if you got bullied to this point, I'm sorry you went through that. But God wants to take those words from your attackers and send them back. You don't have to be defined by what people said about you. Let me pick you up if you don't know how to. You're not alone, man, you got a friend in me. You got better days ahead of you, I just pray you begin to see. Know that everything the devil did to you, he wants you to replay. But everything the devil took from you, God wants to replace. Listen to me right now and you better look me right in the face. You were created for more than to die in this place. Don't do it, man, please don't take your life. Just take my hand and we'll make this right. I promise if you do this, you'll regret it. You'll wake up in eternity and remember I said it. And you wish so bad you could just go back. I'm here for you right now, please just know that. And if you think you're alone in this fight, you've been lied to. That depression came after me and I nearly died too. I thought suicide was the only way and death was meant for me. The devil played his music and I sat front row through that symphony. I walked through the fire and I felt that heat, but I pushed past the clutter and I stood to my feet. I walked out and I refused to look back. I took my depression and threw it right back into that wood stack. And that fire must have blazed 50 feet high. And now I plan on leaving a legacy to look back on someday when I die. And right now I'm telling you to stand up too. Deep down inside you know it's the right thing to do. Think about your family, think about you. Don't kill yourself, please don't do it. Whatever you're facing, God will see you through it. I had a fan kill himself and his mom asked if I could come see her. She was depressed and asked if I could meet her. 2 weeks later the depression beat her. She ran into a telephone pole without a seatbelt and a two-seater. And I wish right now I could crawl through these speakers and somehow convince you not to go the same route she did. I wish I could change the fact that you feel defeated. I wish I could lock my arms around you and tell the devil to beat it. But I can't reach everyone even though I do my best to try. Some people believe the lie that it's just best to die, and they think it's the simple way out. But they're not here to see the way things play out. They don't see the hurt they cause, the pain they leave. I take this seriously, this isn't a game to me. Even thinking about ending your life is living dangerously. So please just listen to my voice. Right now you have a choice. You can choose life or you can get drowned by the noise. Please don't do it. Please just ask for help. If not for your family, do it for yourself.
Hey guys, Joel back here with Backwards Brothers and with Tony, and we have our special guest Annie Zen right over here. Say hi, Annie.
Hi, everyone.
And so Annie is actually an expert in the field of many things, but we're gonna in this specific subject we're talking about suicide.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
By the way, which reminds me, you're between two counselors, so just so you know,
I feel safe.
you feel safe. That's important.
This is my safe spot.
And this is a safe conversation. But Annie, I forgot something.
What?
The answer to your true and false question.
Okay, so everybody should remember what that true and false question was. And the answer to that is
False.
absolutely.
What
So
was
if
the
you
question again?
answered false, man, I should probably have that in front of me. But it's relying on my memory. But if you should have that question memorized. So the answer is false. I will get back to that.
And I believe it was along the lines of showing symptoms.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
Which I think that leads us right into a good segment to pop over to talk about.
Yeah.
symptoms and kind of some of the stats and things you kind of bring for us.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm Annie Zen. I'm a school counselor at our local elementary school, but I also have my LPC license, which is a clinical counseling license, and I created and have been the director of the local crisis response team here in town, where we support our county and school districts within our county, and so our school district and surrounding school districts. And if there's ever a death of a student or a staff member, we send crisis counselors out to those buildings to support them. So
Okay. How many crisis counselors does the school have?
well, we have our 5 school counselors, and then we have local counselors like Tony and a few of our other counselors at Orchid Health Center and through Trillium Services. And then we have some school psychologists and social workers who are part of that team.
Okay,
So,
excellent.
yeah.
Later, but I hear that one of the, you talk about Oregon specifically, they say people in the Northwest tend to be more depressed because of the lack of sun so much. Is that something that's true, or has to maybe takes part in that, or?
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors going on. If you look at the states with the highest suicide rates, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana are the top 3. We think about western states where people are more spread out. There may be more isolation, more rural towns in the west. And also access to weapons is another big one. Seasonal depression, we know with all the rain, that can be a contributing factor. So there could be a lot of different things at play.
Gotcha. And I think here in Oregon we call it liquid sunshine.
Yes, the rain. Hopefully you like rain if you live here, because
Yes.
it's something we always have.
You know, living in Alaska, I always sat under a sunlight, and that helped with a little bit of that seasonal affected
Yeah,
disorder
that's
kind of.
So like
Yeah.
like a UV type of light type of thing.
It is like a UV, creates some vitamin D.
I think it's called a happy light.
Happy light.
Yeah.
Happy light.
Yes.
I think most of us call those tanning beds.
Well, I could go further with that, but Annie.
Yeah, so in Oregon, we have on average a person dies by suicide once every 12 hours in our state from suicide. So that's pretty alarming and eye-opening for a lot of people.
It's crazy.
We are in Clackamas County right now, and so Clackamas County actually has higher rates of suicide than our nearby Washington and Multnomah counties. For those of you who don't know, that's kind of the Portland metro area. Clackamas County has higher rates than those nearby counties.
Would that possibly be because also Clackamas County is larger, or is it just the Multnomah County would be more densely populated, or does that have any factors at all or anything?
So these are actually rates per 100,000. So
Okay.
it's controlled
Equivalent.
for
Gotcha.
population. So again, thinking about Clackamas County being a little bit more rural, people are more spread out, and there may be more isolation and access to weapons, which are high risk things.
Yeah, I was reading that men are more likely to commit suicide, and
Yeah.
they're more likely to go through with it because they tend to do more lethal means.
Yeah, specifically older white men are, the risk factor kind of goes up starting at age 45, but especially white men over the age of 75 have the highest of all groups for suicide rates.
Oh, really? What was the one we were looking at some factors last night? You remember that report we were looking at? We were actually surprised in what they had in that test.
In terms of the ages.
Yeah, the ages. It was actually, this was a test of like 2,700 people, something like that.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was actually showing that teens had the highest in those levels. So I was kind of curious.
Yeah, that's
Is that something that maybe? And this was from I think 2018 to 2019, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so teens, you're right. I'm glad you brought that up. Teens tend to have higher ideation, so that's thinking about suicide.
That makes sense actually. Before
Yeah, so-
But older white men have more completed.
Success.
Yeah.
I don't want to use that word. That's not a.
Right.
Yes.
More deaths by suicide.
deaths by
so,
suicide, that's it.
yeah, choosing our words carefully is so
Yes.
important.
Yes.
What's
learning
the difference
that.
between ideation and the actual act? Ideation, you made a differentiation between the two.
Yeah. So ideation is having those thoughts like maybe I would be better off dead, maybe my family or my friends would be better off without me, thinking like that, or even maybe making a plan of some sort. Whereas the act of suicide is actually dying, right? Or some people are in the hospital afterwards. So so thinking versus doing.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Do you have any more stats for us?
Yeah. So in our county, we have on average 1 death every 5 days in Clackamas County, which is pretty high. And like you said, it's white men over 45 are the biggest. The biggest factor. We also there's some different groups that are at higher risk. So thinking about military veterans, on average 8,800 military personnel die every year by suicide in this country.
Now, is that active in veterans or just veterans alone?
That is a great question. I
Yeah.
believe it is active and veterans. They've
Okay.
actually found that members waiting deployment are at higher risk for suicide than military personnel that are overseas.
Oh, really?
Waiting for deployment.
Yes,
So
and
would-
that anxiety of
Being a veteran that's deployed to Afghanistan and been overseas and having friends that have gone multiple tours too, do they have any correlation or any statistics that talk about if it's higher amongst those who have to go back multiple times versus the first time or anything?
I didn't read about that, but I did read that depending on whether our country is actively at war or not, that that can change how at risk military personnel are. So it's very interesting how it fluctuates based on political events and what's going on. And and then of course we have veterans who come back who a lot of times suffer from PTSD, and that suicide can kind of go along with that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what else? Kind of a great information you got here for us.
I also want to talk about LGBT youth. That's another high risk population. So LGBT youth, for those of you who don't know, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 4 times greater risk of suicide than their heterosexual peers. And for youth who are not accepted by their family or face family rejection, they are actually 8.5 times more likely to attempt suicide. So that family rejection is a huge risk factor.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So, with that particular part, is it more prominent amongst men or youth male, youth females? Do the rates vary, or are they pretty much the same?
That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know that transgender youth have higher rates of suicide, and so do bisexual youth have higher rates of suicide than lesbian or gay peers, and all of them have higher rates of suicide than heterosexual peers.
And
And
my question, being that you're in that area, and the reason why I was asking the question is, I know bullying is a big thing in school,
Yeah.
and I'm curious if it's if the bullying would be worse for like a young man that's as far as like gay or bisexual or even transgender versus like a young lady that's one of those as well. So
yeah, I could imagine that being
I
the
don't-
case. And overall, men, as we know, kind of across ages, men and boys have higher rates than female counterparts, and it's hard to know. But definitely bullying and harassment is a huge risk factor.
And a thought about this, since you asked about gender.
Mhm.
who's more likely in gender to report some suicidal thoughts?
Good
amongst
question.
gender?
Good
That's a
question.
great question. My guess would be females. I haven't read a specific study about that, but I do know that girls tend to be much more open and socialized to share their feelings is
Yeah.
much more common, whereas a lot of boys and men in our culture are taught to kind of suck it up, don't show how you're feeling, and that can be really terrible if they're suffering or having suicidal ideation or other mental illness and being afraid to share because of the
Yes.
stigma and shame that may
Yes.
come along with that.
You talk
Gotcha.
about stigma and shame, and I know we're going to get into culture soon, but is there anything about the rates of death by suicide when it comes to African Americans or Black people?
Yeah, so they're actually, as a group, lower suicide rates than I think white people have the highest, and then Native Americans are second. And so, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's pretty close to what we were reading too ourselves. Yeah. I think Asian and Pacific Islanders were somewhere either were they just below or above African Americans,
Just above. Just above.
just above. So yeah, we did our research.
Good, good. I love that. Yeah, so definitely when we're talking about the stigma and the shame that come along with it, just the way that we talk about it and the fact that we're talking about it now. I was so excited to be invited on here because the more we
course.
talk about this, the more we can eliminate that shame and stigma.
Yeah.
And the subject also lines up very closely. We've been talking about cancel culture in some of our previous shows, and so one of the questions that we wanted to ask was, in the world of cancel culture, where online, for youth, their online presence is everything, and it's their reputation, and so when they do something and they're cut out of those groups, we wanted to see what you might say about how that might be as far as suicidal rates and that kind of amounts to like a new version of bullying almost.
Definitely, yeah. So online harassment, online bullying, those kinds of things can be very traumatizing for teens and youth. When we look at the developmental, the brain of a teenager, they're not fully developed yet. So we see a lot more impulsivity and a lack of long-term planning with teenagers, which if you ever met a teenager, you know that sometimes they take more risks than
Yes,
adults.
yes.
And they also tend to put more importance on their peers and the opinions of their peers. So when something like online harassment or bullying or maybe a viral video that they don't want shown, or someone is outed talking about sexual orientation, someone is outed before they're ready, those can be devastating. And oftentimes teenagers will feel like that is the end of the world and they don't see past this event. And those are times that we really want to intervene, we want to give support, and we want to show them that even though this feels permanent, it is temporary and it does get better.
It does get better.
Yeah.
Any more?
I also want to say I've been really impressed with the way that you both have talked about suicide. I've noticed that we haven't used the word commit suicide. I don't know if our viewers have noticed that, but that goes along with the shame and stigma. So the reason why we don't use the word commit is because you commit a sin or you commit a crime, and suicide is neither of those. Suicide is related to mental illness, or drug and alcohol addiction is another big risk factor. We know that 90% of people who die by suicide are suffering a mental illness or drug and alcohol addiction or a combination of both. And suicide is a result of that mental illness. So we want to say die by suicide, which you both have done such a great job of. We never want to say commit, which is difficult to do. So
Especially that used to be the original way to say things, and so it's kind of that's what people have brought to say. So
definitely.
it's untraining and then retraining. So
Yeah.
But it takes that shame out.
Definitely. We want to look at it from a medical model.
Yeah.
So the same way that you would, if you were having chest pain, you would go to a doctor. If you're having depression, we want you to go to a
Yes.
counselor. We
Of
want
course,
you to get
of
that
course.
checked out.
Absolutely.
So, again, I want to come back around to the cancel culture piece of things. What is cancel culture in school looking like, and these days, as far as like kids kind of being cut out of groups and stuff? And I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about how that mentally has been kind of going through schools and affecting people, and how it might be tracing back to their homes. We talked about how the online presence can affect them and maybe drive that online bullying can cause them to consider suicidal ideations. What about just a general, like for example, just kind of being cut out of a group, or even something like in the world today that's happening, maybe not directly in the school, but they're seeing things that they care about, or people that they idolize maybe being cut out of society. How is that affecting them and students in the school as well? And is that causing some issues, like maybe their favorite rapper that that they're so connected to, and things are so immediate these days, so they start seeing those affected someone that they idolize? Is that crushing to them? Is that causing any uptick in suicide or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think I heard a lot of different questions in that question that you asked, so I'm going to try and break it down.
Run for it.
Cancel culture is a hot topic right now. That's a hot phrase, and I don't know that we have time to get into that whole thing. Generally, I've heard the term cancel culture more being used kind of on a nationwide level, so that's a very different expression than a child in a friend group being ostracized, right?
Yeah.
And we know that something like being ostracized, or a death of someone close to us, especially if it's by suicide, is definitely going to increase your risk of suicide. Knowing someone who's died by suicide is the #1 risk factor. And so then when we think about celebrities who have maybe died by suicide, that how the media handles those reportings definitely can increase or decrease the suicidal ideation in youth, and especially the fans. So
Gotcha. What about the some of the more, what it was to say, look at 20 years ago, back when I was in high school, information didn't come on at the tip of your finger so easy, and it wasn't right there. But with social media and news that you're on your phone, and everybody's got a device in their hands, how has that really adjusted like mood and again, how's it affecting like suicide rates in the schools?
yeah, I wish there was
Hope I'm not taking your questions.
I wish there was one clear answer.
Yeah.
The hard thing is that there's
nuanced, yeah.
there's so many factors at play. It's hard to pinpoint this is the exact thing that's causing it, right? So it's all correlations. But what we do know is that suicide rates have been steadily inclining over the past 20 years or so.
Okay.
We also know, if we look at celebrity suicide deaths and how they are handled differently, we know like Marilyn Monroe, for example, that death was very glorified. There were a lot of graphic details. It was on all the newspapers. They saw a significant uptick in suicide rates immediately after that. Versus Kurt Cobain, who was another famous celebrity who died by suicide. Media is not giving graphic details, that we're really emphasizing this was a tragedy for the general population.
That's actually funny that you kind of talked about media a little bit in there, because again, go back to a study that we were looking at last night. Do you recall when, was it 90, sort of mass media should have some sort of effect when it comes to suicide, and kind of mentioning on that, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I remember reading this. But actually, I wanted to, it used to be back in the day, you had to
Kind of thing, but for that person, it may feel like the end of the world. And so I think it's really important to listen to that person and having empathy for what importance they place on it. And if they think it's a huge loss, it is a huge loss. And it could be moving schools, it could be the loss of a pet, it could be a lot of things which maybe we don't see as devastating, but that person may see as devastating and could
Yeah.
increase their risk of suicide.
Wow.
Definitely.
Wow.
So, well, I know we're running short on this set time. So, do you want to continue with your stats there? I don't want to.
Yeah, we've actually run through a lot of my stats already. But yeah, so kind of going off of what we've already talked about a little bit, secrecy around a death, if somebody has died by suicide, keeping that a secret can actually start to spread rumors, and that can actually create suicide risk in some people. And isolation, guilt from, maybe a loved one has died by suicide, and the loved ones are feeling a lot of guilt around that. That can increase their suicide risk. A lot of people often feel blame for if a loved one dies by suicide, and so that can put them at higher risk. And then the lack of support from the larger community and their families is also a huge risk factor.
Gotcha.
Annie, I got to know you through just not being only being a colleague, but through a postvention and a prevention teaching that you put on, and I thought it was really rich in terms of the effects of suicide through the relationships that's formed because of that person.
Yeah, I'd love to define those terms. So when we're
Yeah.
talking about suicide, we talk about prevention, so before someone dies, intervention, which means interrupting the attempt, and then postvention is after the person dies. And what we know from our research and statistics is that the way that the postvention is done, how we respond to a death of a suicide, can actually then be suicide prevention for the larger community. So it is this
Yep.
circular
The
pattern.
webs of relationship.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so all of us, especially, we're in a small town right now, everyone is connected, but even in larger towns, and even with celebrities, people feel very close, even if they've never met that celebrity in person. And so when we think about our circles of influence, we have our family, friends, and we have our larger community, and then we have our country, our, the world, right? That can
Yes.
extend a lot of ways. And so when we know that someone in our circles has died by suicide, our risk of suicide ourselves goes up.
I'm glad you brought up celebrities because I really found myself having a hard time with Whitney Houston's death and how she,
I didn't realize that she was suicide.
death by suicide, overdose.
And that's-
It
So
was really hard because you connect with people through music, and her life story was out there, so there was something you could grab from it.
right, and so that's a great example of how we would want to talk about Whitney Houston. We would want to really emphasize all the potential that she had, and all the music that maybe she still had to give, and to her voice that has now been silenced by her untimely death, and what a tragedy that is. And that for other Whitney Houston fans, we want to think about ways to honor Whitney Houston, like perhaps donating to a suicide prevention helpline would be a great way to honor her.
That's a good way.
And then getting help ourselves if we start to feel depressed or suicidal as a result of
No.
that.
Yeah, and of course I'm dating myself with Whitney Houston.
Right.
A lot of our audience are like, who's Whitney? But a lot of people know her. So,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
voice.
Don't make me sing to share. No one wants to hear that. Well, we'll reach at the end of our set here, so we're going to take a quick break, guys, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about some myths and facts.
Yeah, I have
Yes.
some myths and facts to share with you all to challenge some of the ideas you may have.
Yes, and during this time, do not forget to engage, okay? So
Please, send us
we
your
want to see
questions.
questions, like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff.
Yes.
We'll see you
We'll see you here in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Thanks.
Bye. Hi, welcome to Stillwaters. Glad you're here.
I'm an LPC, and I'm licensed with the state of Oregon.
The first time you come, you will be coming as a client and then quickly change into a guest. You may have some questions about what it's like to come and see a therapist. I will come and greet you at the door. You're going to get greeted by our receptionist, who is the intake coordinator. She will get you to fill out a couple of forms. And then what we will do is I will greet you. We have some coffee, we have some tea, we have some waters. The way we set up our facility here is to inspire a safe place where you can feel like you're being heard. Our mission at Stillwater is to inspire change through listening with love. So we always hope that that is your experience as you come through. Sessions are as long as you need them. So you have your choice there. There's no limitation on how much you come see me. If you are looking for a therapist, then you can find me on Psychology Today out of Estacada, Oregon. We look forward to talking with you, and we're excited that you have chosen us to come alongside of you on this journey.
Hey guys, we are back again to Backwoods Brothers, and we are here with Annie Zen, an expert in the field of not only psychology but specifically suicide. And so we just want to remind you that some of the things we're going to be talking about here, or the videos you may see, could be triggering to yourself or to someone that's watching. So please, if you do feel triggered, the number at the bottom of the screen here, please feel free to call that. And there's people there to talk to you about it right now. If you have a friend that you might be watching this, if you feel like you need to get them connected with somebody, numbers there, or go to the article on backwoodsbrothers.com. Under the articles, there's a whole section on resources for all the different type of suicide prevention and help and everything else. Is all in that article. Let's go ahead and take a look at those, and there's a lot of resources for yourself or for family or friends, okay? So let's go ahead and jump right into some myths.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest myth out there is that asking someone if they're suicidal is going to put the idea in their head and maybe cause them to be suicidal, and that is definitely a myth. That's not true. Oftentimes people can be living even for years with thoughts of suicide that they're too afraid to bring up to someone. And when they can see that a loved one or counselor notices that suicide may be on their mind and asks them, are you thinking about suicide? That actually is a huge relief and takes off this pressure. We were talking earlier about shame and stigma. It opens the door and it makes it okay to talk about, which means it makes it okay to get help and do something about it. So
Your statement about how a counselor asking about that, if they're feeling suicidal. I noticed that you get a lot of questions and things like in doctors' offices and all sorts of different forums. Are you feeling suicidal and stuff? I'm kind of curious. Do people actually use that, or do they usually? Are they more likely to, when they're in the midst of a conversation, to bring it out? Does that question actually have some sort of effect?
yes, definitely. In my experience as a counselor, the times that I have asked that question, people have answered surprisingly honest,
Yes.
and have been very relieved and grateful that I brought it up, because then it launches us into a discussion about what to do next. And so asking the question, talking about it, having conversations like this lets people around you know that you're safe people, that you're comfortable talking about these things. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, in my experience also as a former pastor, if someone who's in the public eye expresses a thought that they would consider ending their life, a lot of pastors and people in the public eye are very fearful of actually answering that honestly because of the possible job loss or any other thing like that. How would you answer that?
Yeah, there are, unfortunately, in our country, there are certain professions that it's the stigma is real, and people are afraid of their employers perhaps finding out. Airline pilots is a great example. And then oftentimes service members as well, and law enforcement, that they're afraid if their boss were to find out that they were having a mental illness or they were having suicidal ideation, that they could lose their jobs. And that fear is real. That threat is real. My hope would be that we can end that stigma through these discussions, because not talking about it doesn't take the thoughts away. It doesn't.
Yes.
It doesn't make it so that there's less suicidal pilots. It makes it so that there's
Less
suicidal pilots who are not talking about
less
suicide.
conversation. Exactly.
Which actually increases the risk. So
And to kind of bounce off of that a little bit, I know that there's one of the things is just coming from like guys and stuff that have like guns in their homes and things like that. That's something that they're really big into. That's their sport and everything else. And but yet, if they have those thoughts, they've always been afraid to speak about it. What would you say to those guys out there that would have that? Because it's important that they talk about it and they get the help, but they're afraid they're going to lose their guns and stuff, and they're never going to get them back and those type of things. So especially with veterans.
No, and guns are a big part of the culture, especially out here in Clackamas County. We're in a rural area. There's a lot of hunting, and that, culturally, hunting can be a great, family sport and whatnot. I would say that access to lethal means, the reason why that increases the risk, and one of the reasons why men die by suicide more than women, is because of the means that they choose. So women on average choose less lethal means, like pills, for example, that may be more likely to get interrupted. Someone calls 911 and the person ends up surviving. Whereas men who maybe they have been drinking and they have a firearm right there, the drinking maybe lowers their inhibitions, and kind of impulsively it's right there. But we know that something as simple as moving the gun to a friend's house, a trusted loved one, getting a gun safe, and maybe asking your partner or someone to change the lock on the key, or hide the key somewhere else, that even that short amount of extra time it takes can be life-saving. And if that plan is interrupted in any way, even as, you know, I have to now ask someone for the code to the gun safe, that can be enough to give people the time to rethink their impulsive idea and say, oh, actually, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So something as simple like that. I'm not, you know, I'm not anti-gun. I'm just saying there are steps that we can put in place to make it
and
more safe
exactly,
for gun owners.
even as much as like a trigger lock or something like that.
It's that friendly accountability.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
but I want to address the what I believe would be a myth, and that is that that if they talk about it, they're going to lose their gun to not get them back. Period. So that they're going to get reported by a mental health professional or a friend, and then that's it. So can you address that, maybe to put ease some fears or confirm something?
Yeah, so I mean, gun laws are going to be different wherever you are.
of course.
But as a counselor, I'm not here to take anyone's gun away. That's not my job. But we do talk about risk reduction. If someone came into my office and was talking about suicide, I would say, let's talk about safety planning. And one of the things I would say is, if there's weapons in the home, how can we just move those temporarily? So we know that someone who is currently having suicidal ideation, actively suicidal, they're not going to be suicidal forever.
Yes.
So once they get the mental health treatment that they need, and they're able to get those guns back because it's no longer that temptation.
Gotcha.
What I hear is being proactive might help too.
Exactly.
If you feel that this is a concern, be proactive.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah, because if you've taken that extra steps, then it might it might reduce any of that concern that a counselor may be like, hey, I need to make a phone call or something.
Definitely.
So,
And
okay.
my work is primarily with youth and teenagers. So a lot of these conversations I have with parents about, look like, and how can we keep the guns away from the kids.
Should be already a pre-conversation.
Safety, responsible gun handling, and especially in situations like this. But someone might say an argument to that, well, isn't a knife just as good as a stop? How would you answer an argument like that?
So research tells us that when someone has a plan, so for example, someone has a plan that they are going to die by suicide via a gun, and you temporarily remove that gun, they don't switch their plan because they've kind of fixated on that. They don't start looking around for knives or rope or whatever. So when you're talking to about knives.
Gotcha.
And
So
that's the point, is is there a plan? And you're right.
diagnoses, and treatment of mental illnesses, that it would help to lower those stats.
I would love to take this,
Yes,
if that's okay.
take it.
So one of the reasons why I work with elementary schoolers is because this is 19 times greater risk, and things like bipolar, family. And so it's important, if we can, at an early age, detect these warning signs that maybe a mental illness is developing, get people the help they need, then we can, down the line, prevent maybe a tragedy.
Awesome.
Just a little clinical question there. So bear with me, you guys. Is there a differentiation between bipolar 1 and 2 in terms of statistics?
Not according to, this is from one that's 14 times greater risk. So, and a lot of times these are comorbid. So they're
Yes.
happening together. Maybe someone has bipolar and opioid. So all of these combined are things that we can intervene at an early age, get people to help, get them into counseling, and hopefully catch these things before they become so overwhelmingly large.
You are about early intervention, so I see why you took
It's
that.
I
good.
love it.
Yes,
Stopping before the problem becomes a problem.
absolutely.
So, let's hear another myth that you got.
Yes, so another myth is that only mental health professionals can intervene on someone who is suicidal, and that is, again, absolutely a myth. Suicide is the most preventable cause of death. Any small save a life. So this is really where you all come in. You don't have to go to grad school and
Yes.
get all the student debt
Yes.
to save people's lives. Anyone and everyone should get trained to have these conversations, because you never know when this might pop up personally or professionally or just.
It's a good point. I mean, it could be as simple as someone giving that number that's on the bottom of the screen to somebody as well.
Exactly, and offering to call that number with
Exactly.
them, which I've done with people. I've said, let's call this together. Let's talk to them. They're super nice. They're just there to talk. They're just if you want to get connected to a counselor, they're really awesome. So.
That's interesting because, yes, a lot of it can be caught even before it reaches a counselor because of the degree of relationship. A lot of people, I find, tell their close loved one, or then even before it gets to the office, if you will.
Definitely.
So let's ask you this. There's another question that came in from a user I wanted to go ahead and read. It says, do you think suicide is around more today than, say, in our parents' or grandparents' times?
Ooh.
So, and I would say, I just want to talk a little bit real quick before you get to that one. The study we had read actually showed an incline over time, over the last 20 years, I think it was. Was it? Okay.
Yeah. So I would say it's hard to tell. My gut answer is yes, that rates are going up for some of the different reasons that we've already talked about, but also reporting. We're getting
Yes.
better
Yes.
at
Yes.
differentiating different causes of death. And so something like, for example, a car accident, right? It might be hard to determine if that was a suicide or a genuine accident. And so things like that, we're getting better at detecting those things and being more honest in reporting.
Gotcha. What about
Statistics, they base it off of 100,000 people.
sample sizes? Yeah.
But at the same time, with their people interacting more through social media,
Yes.
and having more access to others, oftentimes we see more depression after someone has been on social media. I think the study was done on Facebook, where they had participants look at other Facebook profiles and rate their depression, and on average people rated themselves as more depressed after looking at other people's profiles, and a lot of that is because people only want to show the best parts of their life, as if they're going on vacation every day, versus when they looked at their own profiles, Facebook profiles, their depression actually went down. So seeing their own life in a positive light was helpful. But if you're constantly just looking at everyone else's Instagrams or, what everyone else is doing,
That dopamine rush.
yeah, that can definitely cause depression, which,
Comparative depression, something like that, right? I don't know if that's even a word thing. I make it up myself.
comparative,
Comparative
comparing
depression.
our lives to others, which
Yeah.
wasn't so much a problem in our grandparents' times where they didn't have all those things.
Well, they did something like this when their grandparents' times.
Right.
Here's a question. Yeah, like that. Here's a question. You mentioned Facebook, but there's a lot of movies that have come out, especially Netflix. 13 Reasons. You've heard about that one. How to
Yes.
Save a Life. I hear the sigh there.
Uh-huh.
You want to say something to that before I even continue?
I will say that I have not watched those shows just because of my own suicide prevention training. I made a choice not to watch those shows, but the feedback I've heard from other counselors has been that a lot of those shows did not handle suicide in the right way. And if I'm remembering correctly, there was an increase in suicide after.
A Contagion.
Yes, a contagion effect
Wow.
after. And I don't remember the exact amount. I don't have that in front of me, but
Wow.
how that goes back to how we talk about suicide, how it's represented, if it's glorified, or if it is seen more as this is a tragic early early death of someone who could have, you know, contributed so much more to our society, how we view it, it really changes people's suicide risk.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So now, or the other thing that happens in our high schools as a youth pastor, I've heard kids go, as a joke, go kill yourself. Go kill yourself. And there was a lot of that going on along with the word triggered. I've heard those misused terms that become fads. Have you experienced that?
Yes, definitely. We see that in school. I know a lot of our kids are watching YouTube videos, and gamers often say a lot of those things. And yeah, that goes back to having these conversations and proper training. I know that our high school counselors are amazing. They actually work with the high school students on suicide training. Our school district is training every single staff member in suicide prevention, which is really amazing, and so that they're aware of those warning signs, but also teaching kids that why is this not an okay thing to say, and why is it, you know, why is it hurtful? Why is it putting that person at risk? What else could we say instead? Is really important.
Yeah, that's one more actually. Go ahead.
I'll say, wasn't there a while back where a young lady had actually, I think, said something to her ex-boyfriend or boyfriend? He committed suicide, and she was held accountable to that.
Yes, yeah, that was a very famous court case.
Yes.
That you know, through the text messages, I believe she encouraged him and to die by suicide, and then she ended up being held accountable for that. So it's very serious, and that hasn't been the only court case. There's been more since, and so getting young people, especially teenagers who maybe don't realize the power of their words, getting them to understand how big of a deal that is really important. And, you know, potentially you could save a life and also save them from jail time or, you know, legal consequences.
It's saving two lives over in that case, you know, because, you know, a child can destroy their lives by not understanding what they're doing, so the school getting them that training is important. So you were going to say something, Tony.
Yeah. Are people, can you dispel this myth for us? Are people with depression more likely or least likely to hurt themselves more than they would hurt others? So I've heard a statistic that people with depression tend to hurt themselves or choose means of hurting themselves than others.
Yes, yeah. And that is, I would definitely say, I don't have that statistic in front of me, but yes, people who with depression, oftentimes it's self-injury as opposed to hurting others.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I know
I could have said or done. Oh, I had no clue you were masking a troubled soul. God only knows what went wrong and why you leave the stage in the middle of a song. Now in my mind I keep you frozen as a 17-year-old, rounding third to score the winning run. You always played with passion, no matter what the game. When you took the stage, you shine just like the sun. Oh, that's what I keep asking. And was there anything I could have said or done? Oh, I had no clue you were masking a troubled soul. Oh, God only knows what went wrong and why you leave the stage in the middle. Oh, yeah, my face. Through tangled thoughts I hear a mockingbird sing. This old world really ain't that bad a place. Oh, there's no comprehending, and who am I to try to judge or explain? Oh, but I do have one burning question. Who told you life wasn't worth the fight? They wrong, they lied. Now you're gone, and we cry. It's not like you to walk away in the middle of a song. You're beautiful song. You're absolutely beautiful song.
That you have actually submitted some of your questions. Keep them coming in. We've had a chance to look at them during the break, and I cannot wait to jump right into it. So why don't we do that, Joel?
Okay, well, we're just going to go right on into it here. Real quick, just to keep the disclaimer one more time. Some of the things we could be talking about may be triggering to some people. So if you guys are feeling at all like you need to talk to somebody or been really upset by things we're talking about, there's a number right here at the bottom of the screen. Please take a minute to give it a call. Really great people. We've talked about it a few times about how nice they are, and they just want to talk to you. That's all it is. So, by all means, if you're having any sort of thoughts or anything, please give that number a call. Okay. So the first question on the list here is, how do you help someone who doesn't want to?
Thing that I always think about is there an amendment who maybe says, I'm going to drive home and kill myself, right? That would be an immediate threat. And at that point, if they do not want the help, you feel like you are out of your depth, at that point you can call 911. They can put a psychiatric hold on the person and help keep them safe for the time being, while people with more experience can help that person. That's a pretty extreme situation, but I do want you to know that if you think someone is immediately in danger, calling 911 and getting them immediate help is best. For someone who maybe says that they're thinking about suicide, but they're not ready to get into counseling, maybe they have a plan, but they don't want to call the crisis line, at that point we want to make sure that they feel supported and that there's someone nearby. So my question at that point would be, do you have someone who can stay with you, or do you have somewhere that maybe you could go stay with a loved one? Can I'm going to go around your house and I'm going to collect some things to keep you safe, and then I'm going to stay with you, and maybe we'll order pizza and watch a movie together, and we'll just kind of hang out until I feel like you're safe. And maybe we can talk about counseling tomorrow after we've gotten a good night's sleep, right? So that's how I would, depending on the situation.
Good.
Go ahead.
I'll say, so you'd say kind of keep them safe in the immediate, and then give them a chance to kind of let the thought kind of pass, and then kind of work with them by just talking to them. Would you say that's a good kind of summary of that?
Yeah, definitely. So in the morning, they might be feeling different, and maybe
Yeah.
you can have a conversation about counseling or calling the crisis line at that point together.
Gotcha.
There, I had an experience with someone close to me where they had thoughts and they told a good friend, and the friend said, "Are you going to be okay tonight?" And that friend said, "No, I think I will be." And my friend, being very pushy like that person is, said, "I'm coming over." And, "Oh, no, you don't need to come over." "Well, this is what I'll do. I'll come over. I'm going to have pizza. If you want to join me, you're totally fine. But I'm going to go have pizza in your house with you." And so that actually ended up being a really good, in that way, a way
Yes.
to just kind of insert yourself in there.
Great example.
Definitely. And I mean, if it's a matter of saving your loved one's life, it's good to be a little pushy,
Yeah.
right? In that way that, just aggressively loving them and saying, all right,
Aggressively
I'm
loving.
in it with you, right?
Yes.
You never want to leave someone alone. So if someone expresses to you that they're having thoughts of suicide, you never want to leave them alone. You want to either stay with them or get them to someone who can help. And if that's not you, maybe that's a loved one, or maybe that's a counselor, finding someone else who can help them so that they're not by themselves.
It's great advice. I'm going to go to the next one here. We are veterans at a higher rate of suicide than the average citizen.
Yes, so I don't have, I think there's lots of factors. So it depends on age, it depends on gender, it depends on if they're active or not. So there's a lot of other factors, but in general, military veterans as a whole, I believe, are at a higher risk,
Okay.
some more than others.
Would you say, just comparing, give it a more definition to that, post-deployment veterans versus average citizen?
That's a great question. So I don't want to say anything that might not
Gotcha.
not align with statistics, because I don't have those statistics in front of me. So I would say my guess would be yes, because we know that a lot of times veterans who come home from deployment oftentimes struggle with addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, feeling isolated or feeling like they don't belong in this culture anymore, because they've gotten so used to the culture of being overseas in a war zone that now coming back to civilian life is a very difficult transition for them. So I would say overall my guess would be yes, that veterans would be at a higher risk, but I don't have any data supporting that.
Gotcha. And just, I wanted to say this on behalf of Annie here. When she speaks, a lot of her stuff is coming out of opinions and personal views, but not professional, like, you're not speaking on behalf of the school or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. She's not speaking on behalf of the local school district or anything of her employment. She's speaking on her license and her experience and that type of grounds.
Yes, and
Okay.
as a post-vention trainer for the county, and then a director of a crisis response team, I have all this experience. But you're right, I'm not currently representing the school
Yep.
district at this
I just want
moment.
to be very clear about that. We have our own disclaimers that talk about it for us, but we wanted to make sure that you were
Thank you.
you were
Thank
properly.
you for doing that.
Yes. Okay. So this one is a very, very long question. What are the red flags to watch for?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And some of you might be thinking, what are these things that I need to watch out for? So the strongest predictors are previous suicide attempt, so someone who's already attempted, current talk of suicide or making a plan, a strong wish to die or preoccupation with death. So this could be their thoughts, their music, their reading, what they're watching, all around death. Depression, especially if there's hopelessness and withdrawal, substance use, and then a recent suicide attempt by a friend or family member. Those are the big ones. But also things like getting a gun out of nowhere, or maybe stockpiling pills like they're
Okay.
preparing, giving away prized possessions, whatever this means to you, just suddenly giving it away, impulsivity or like increased risk taking. And a lot of times, a surprising one is sometimes loved ones will notice that the person seems happier or seems kind of relieved, you know, which can be really confusing. But really, a lot of times when someone has been suffering with depression and suicidal ideation for a long time, and they finally make a plan in their head, they feel a sense of control, or, you know, I know this is ending soon idea, and so they may actually have a little increase in their happiness in that moment, but that can be concerning if it's kind of coming out of nowhere, right? So a sudden change in mood and behavior are pretty big risk factors.
That's definitely good to know. And a lot of the things that you just mentioned are actually in the article on the website too.
Oh, great.
So if you want to reference back to those in case you kind of went through them fast and got a good look at those, scroll down in the article and you'll be able to see a lot of those listed out. So let's go to the next one. So do you think suicide is an impulsive action, or with the planning, does it make it not impulsive? And are those who have impulse issues, like kids, adults with ADHD, at higher risk?
Those are all, those three questions are all great questions.
Yes.
So, the impulsivity is hard because generally suicide, people who are contemplating suicide, generally that's something that they've been contemplating for a long time, or it's been on their mind for a long time. But it's kind of that breaking point. It gets to be so painful and so much that they feel like death could be the only relief from the depression. And in those moments when they're most vulnerable, having, you know, a weapon accessible could make that impulsive, right? And so I haven't actually, you know, on my list of mental illnesses that are most at risk for suicide, ADHD wasn't actually listed, which is really interesting because I love that question. I think that's super interesting. But I don't know about the overlap between ADHD. I have major depression, bipolar, OCD, panic disorder, and schizophrenia are the top 5 mental disorders that coincide with increased suicide risk.
It's interesting that panic disorder is in there.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I never really thought about panic disorder being a contributing factor.
Yeah.
Huh.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's see. We think we have one more question here. This one's a little bit longer, so bear with me here. What about YouTube and all the things kids have access to these days when they make jokes out of suicide? How do you explain to them why making a joke of it is dangerous, all while letting them know that you are there for them and it's safe to tell you if they are actually feeling that way? This isn't our own personal life, but I've heard this isn't in our own personal life, but I've heard so many young children make jokes about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I work in an elementary school, so I've definitely had these conversations, and I would say exactly how you ask this question could be the way that you talk to young children. And so oftentimes using words that are, you know, that feel appropriate. Kids get it. Kids are really a lot smarter and more aware than adults give them credit for.
Trust me, my daughter takes advantage of that often.
And so having a conversation about, you know, when you said, I think you should kill yourself to that other child, how do you think that child felt? How would it feel if that child actually did die by suicide? How would you feel about that? Did you know that saying those things can be really hurtful and can make that child feel like they don't have any friends in their school, right? We don't want to feel that way. We don't want to pass on that hurt to others. What are some other things we could say instead? And really practicing, I think the more practice kids can get from the adults in their lives about how to reframe those conversations, it's okay to say, I didn't like how you played that game, right?
Right,
Or, you
right.
know, I don't want to play with you anymore.
Yes.
Or, you know, that really sucked.
Yeah.
I'm mad at you right now. Those are all okay things to say that don't include, you know, phrases like you should go kill yourself, right? So rephrasing those and expressing how you're feeling is so important. And that's practice that every kid could use.
As a matter of fact, I don't want to go on a tangent, but I think we need more of an increased teaching on conflict resolution. How
Definitely.
to, yeah,
Definitely, such as like the show is here, where you know
Actually, yes.
we would have
Yes.
potentially hard subjects like this. We're able to talk about them, or even opposing views, like we did on
Yeah.
the previous show, where two of us had opposing views or something, but we can still have that conversation and understand it's okay for that person not to agree with me,
Absolutely.
and for me not to agree with them, and us to have that a different opinions, because we're different people. We're gonna be different, and that's what makes us special. We're not all supposed to be alike, and so just to be able to have a good, healthy conversation that you can have with somebody and still walk away and shake hands and be friends in the end.
and that's what we're trying to model, like
Exactly,
you said. That's the whole
exactly.
reason for this
Well, I
platform.
mean, to talk about suicide, and especially on camera, that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
It's hard to ask these questions, because you're talking about someone ending their life.
Right.
It's a very serious thing. So, but to be able to have that conversation, and you can throw out facts and everything else all day long, but to be able to talk like we do here, we bring up scenarios and situations that are actually touching some of our audience right now, that cause them to interact and to ask these questions. It's that conversation's hard to have, and that's what we're trying to model here.
Definitely. Well, and the thing I would add to that is parents, especially knowing that these conversations are happening on YouTube, they're happening online, they're happening in movies and TV shows. If you're not talking to your child, that's the only information that they're getting is maybe these really negative demonstrations of things like suicide and other topics. So you need to be having these conversations. We all need to be having these conversations so that we can really support children in understanding what's the best way to talk about it and how to get help, and that they know that you're a safe person to come to if they or their friends are ever having these thoughts.
Well, and go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, real fast, that it's important to have the conversation too because of desensitization, and how much of that plays into the way we interact with each other and the words that we say to each other.
And that's kind of one of the next
question?
next question that we're going to
there you
ask
go.
here, is with all the overexposure and desensitization. Can't see.
Desensitization.
Thank you. Of violence and death in the world today,
I
in
can't see
movies
these questions, guys.
and movies and everything. How do you think that's having an effect on our kids?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I would love to have some research and some data describing that. I would love to know. I think that when we look at violence, again, we need to look at how is it being portrayed, and what are the conversations around it.
Yes.
Make a huge difference, right? So
Yeah.
like a superhero coming in and killing the bad guy, right? That's going to be a different thing than maybe a movie that's showing an intruder coming in and, you know, hurting someone, right? Those are maybe the same amount of violence, but totally different scenarios
Good.
around it. And
Yes.
one may be appropriate for children and one may not be appropriate.
Absolutely.
And so having those conversations with your child about like, hey, we just saw something and that was pretty rough. Let's talk about it. How did that feel? Why was that not okay? You know, things like that, and making sure that your kid knows that you're a safe person to talk to about those types of things.
It's good.
Definitely,
It's
definitely.
really good.
Well, and we're actually reaching the end of our time for our questions here. So if you guys have additional questions, and I'm sure some's come up during this time here, We want to give Annie a chance to be able to answer those questions. So what we'll probably do is see if we can get you those questions, and then maybe have you respond to them, and we can post them on our Facebook page.
Absolutely,
Well,
yes.
and we don't want anyone to feel that they, if you guys have a question or something that you'd like to ask Annie or to ask Tony, and you don't want to just put it out there directly, you can actually email us at backwoodsbrothersllc@gmail.com. And I think we're going to put that out there in the chat right now. By all means, please email us directly, and we can get it to one of these guys. If you guys know somebody you'd like to reach out to them directly for your own connection, or you'd like to have us make the connection for you with a friend or something, by all means, please email us, and we'll get you guys to the connections there as well. We want to make sure you guys feel that there's privacy and confidentiality in that as well. We won't be sharing anyone's names if you guys ask us to keep it quiet, or any of the questions you guys might ask. So by all means, otherwise, feel free to ask us a question, and we'll make sure we get it over.
And just to disclose the names a little bit more, if you would use initials, that would be better too.
Yes, even better. So once we pass these, they are both licensed counselors, and so they have the confidentiality piece, and we're just going to push it right off to them, and out of our hands. Well, technically, it'll be in his hands or her hands, so it won't be my hands. So, but yeah, by all means, we just want to make sure that everybody gets help, and that you don't feel like it's. If you don't want to talk to someone anonymously, call the number that's on there. We want to make sure that no one's left out and getting help that they need. That's the whole point, and then having a conversation. So, so our producer is actually asking a question right now.
Oh, okay.
Actually, let's do this. Hey, John, why don't you come on over here onto the camera, and we'd like to actually introduce you to our producer while I have a chance here.
Yes.
What better time than to do this?
Right.
Here, I'm going to scoot over.
So come over here.
Come on. Yes. Come on up.
I'm just gonna have you ask the question right into the mic.
So, what do we do if I was a family or a friend or just someone we've known in our past that how do I say this? This is a hard conversation. This is why you guys are doing this.
Definitely.
If it's like, what if suicide can be connected, or their ideations or whatever is leading them by a spiritual conviction, or it becomes about a spiritual conviction that is leading them towards the acts of maybe ending their life, or like how can someone be supportive and helpful for that friend or person that we know? It's like, oh, okay, how would we help that person? Like if it's like a conviction where they're like, oh, like it has to be this way, there's no other way out, what do you do?
That's a great question. By the way, that was John, our producer. So by all means, give him kudos on it. He does all the hard work behind the scenes. So I'm gonna leave this question to you guys.
That's a tough question, and not one that I've ever run into professionally or personally. I know that there have been some pretty public suicide cults. And so that's kind of another form of suicide contagion, right? And
Yes.
And leaving a cult is a whole struggle in and of itself. There's a lot of factors involved with that, and so I would say that kind of the same things apply that we've already been talking about. Are they in immediate danger? Are they willing to get help? How can we keep them safe and get them into counseling? Do they need to leave a religious organization or a cult that's making them believe this, or are they experiencing some psychosis where they believe that someone or something is telling them to do this? That may be a symptom of schizophrenia, and in that case, maybe a psychiatric hold until doctors and medical professionals can get them the medicine that they need might be the best course of action, and that might be something that we need to call 911 or get them to a hospital if it's serious.
You said it. You said it. The only thing I would add to that is, there is, and this is probably another topic unto itself, but spiritual abuse, and that is a form of psychosis that possibly trusted.
Definitely. So.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah.
And so my last thing I would say, I love these questions. I
Yeah.
think that, I can tell that you guys are putting a lot of thought into them, which is
Yes.
great. And I'm so excited that we're having these conversations. If you're feeling like you want to get better at having these conversations, you want some practice, the website, there is a link to a website called Get Trained to Help, and our link will be on the Backwoods Brothers.
I'll make
Yes.
sure it's added into our article, and I'll put it on our Facebook.
Perfect. And on that link, Get Trained to Help, there are free trainings, and they're currently virtual. And they have mental health first aid, which is a great way to help you get comfortable with talking to someone who's in crisis. There's QPR, which is very similar to CPR. With that, and that's a pretty short training. There's also Assist, which is a longer training if you want even more practice. And these are all free and put on by the county. So
What about
please-
NAMI?
NAMI, yeah, they have other great trainings. That's kind of a nationwide. And so they also have support groups for people.
I think
Yeah.
that's actually, that one there is also on the website there as well already currently right now. So,
Awesome. Yeah. So lots of great resources. So please check out that link.
Definitely. So, like I said, please continue to send your questions in. And so I just think we're going to kind of end our show here shortly. Do you have anything left to talk about, Tony?
No, actually, thank you, Andy, for being here. We love to have you back for show number 2. And also, I want to give you a little bit of a teaser to our next one. Tune in. And Joel, why don't you?
Well, we're going to be continuing our series on cancel culture, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how cancel culture has been affecting business. So, and that can be anywhere from internet and things have been said online that maybe attack business to even with the pandemic and everything that's kind of going on, and how businesses that may have wanted to open, and kind of what's happened with the responses to that, and all the different kind of effects that the business has been dealing in the last year with cancel culture, and how it's really been affecting them, and how they're getting through it and stuff. So that's going to be our next one. We're going to keep the guest as a surprise for now. So I will give you a hint. It is a local business owner here in Estacada, and I'm hoping that they will be able to really surprise you. So,
Awesome. Well, with that, again, keep having these conversations.
Definitely.
And we look forward to seeing you actually next week, or the week after, I should say, with robust dialogue and hearty, authentic conversation.
see you then.